There have been kings throughout history, kings who commanded armies, kings who ruled enormous kingdoms, kings who possessed wealth beyond imagination. But there was one king whose kingdom was unlike anything the world had ever seen. His name was Prophet Sulaiman, a prophet of Allah, a king given extraordinary blessings, a man whose kingdom included things no ordinary ruler could ever control. And yet, one of the most beautiful moments of his life would not involve a great battle. It would not involve an enemy king. It would not involve treasure. It would involve a tiny ant, a creature so small that most people could walk past it without ever noticing. But Prophet Sulaiman noticed, and what happened between them was so beautiful that Allah chose to preserve it in the Quran. Prophet Sulaiman was the son of Prophet Dawood. Allah blessed both of them with knowledge and wisdom. But Sulaiman was given something extraordinary. He was taught to understand the speech of birds and animals. Imagine that to us the sound of birds singing is simply birdsong. The sounds of animals around us are simply sounds. But Allah gave Sulaiman the ability to understand something hidden from ordinary human beings. The Quran tells us that Sulaiman inherited Dawood and said, "O people, we have been taught the language of birds, and we have been given from everything." This wasn't simply a kingdom of gold and palaces. It was a kingdom filled with signs of Allah's power. And Sulaiman understood something that every believer can learn from. Every blessing is from Allah. His knowledge was from Allah. His authority was from Allah. His kingdom was from Allah. His ability to understand creation was from Allah. And this becomes incredibly important because sometimes the greatest test isn't having nothing. Sometimes the greatest test is having everything. Think about what Sulaiman could have felt. He was a king. He was a prophet. He had knowledge. He had authority. He had an extraordinary army, and Allah had subjected the wind to his command. The Quran tells us that the wind traveled according to his command. Jinn also worked for him by Allah's permission, and his armies were organized into groups, human beings, jinn, and birds. Yet, despite possessing all of this, Sulaiman didn't become arrogant before Allah. Instead, he remained grateful. And this is one of the most beautiful qualities in his story, because real greatness isn't simply having power. Real greatness is knowing where that power came from. You can have wealth and still be humble. You can have success and still be grateful. You can have authority and still remember that you are a servant of Allah. Sulaiman understood this, and Allah would soon show us just how humble this great king really was. One day, Prophet Sulaiman was traveling with his army. Imagine the scene: an enormous procession moving across the land, soldiers marching, birds flying overhead, and an army unlike anything ordinary people had ever witnessed. The Quran describes how the armies of Sulaiman were gathered and organized, and eventually they arrived at a particular valley, a valley inhabited by ants. And here the story changes completely, because while the army was approaching, something incredibly small noticed them, an ant. The ant saw the approaching army and understood the danger, not because Sulaiman wanted to harm them, not because the army intended to destroy their homes, but simply because an army that large could accidentally crush them. And the ant did something remarkable. It warned the others. The Quran tells us, "O ants, enter your dwellings, lest Sulaiman and his soldiers crush you while they do not perceive." Think about how beautiful that moment is. A tiny creature protecting its community, warning others, thinking beyond itself. And then comes the part that makes this story unforgettable. Prophet Sulaiman heard it. The king heard the ant, and he understood what it was saying. The army was enormous. The ant was tiny, but Allah allowed Sulaiman to understand its warning, and instead of ignoring it, he smiled. The Quran tells us that when Sulaiman heard the ant's words, he smiled, amused at its speech. Just imagine that moment, a mighty king with an enormous army, standing there and smiling because of the words of a tiny ant, not laughing at it, not mocking it, but appreciating what Allah had allowed him to hear. And then something even more beautiful happened. Sulaiman didn't simply smile and move on. He turned to Allah and made a dua. He said, "My Lord, enable me to be grateful for your favor, which you have bestowed upon me and upon my parents." Look at the response. He could have thought, "Look at what I can understand." He could have thought, "What an extraordinary ability I possess." But instead, his mind went immediately to Allah. "My Lord, this is your blessing. This is your favor. Help me be grateful." And that is the heart of the story. The ant didn't make Sulaiman feel powerful. It made him feel grateful. And perhaps that is what makes the story of Sulaiman so beautiful. A king with an extraordinary kingdom was reminded of something by one of the smallest creatures Allah created. The ant didn't make Sulaiman feel powerful, it made him grateful. And maybe that's something we all need to remember, because sometimes we become so focused on the things we want that we forget to appreciate the things Allah has already given us. But the story doesn't end with that smile, because the kingdom of Sulaiman was unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. There were birds, jinn the wind, and wonders that would leave anyone amazed. And somewhere in that extraordinary kingdom was another story, one involving a magnificent bird, a distant land, and a queen, whose story would lead to one of the most remarkable encounters mentioned in the Quran. Who was she? How did Sulaiman discover her kingdom? And what happened when two kingdoms finally stood face to face? That is where the story takes an extraordinary turn, and we'll uncover it in the next part. If this story brought a little more gratitude into your heart, share it with someone who needs that reminder, and subscribe to Faith Verse for more authentic Islamic stories that inspire faith, hope, and wonder. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.